Good morning, teacher.
Good morning, students. Today we are going to talk about education. Sambhog Shiksha. So now we will learn about reproductive system. This is the male reproductive system. This is the other one. Any questions?
Sir?
Anyone? You? Anyone? Anyone? No? No? Good. Now obviously all you young people want to know, how does Yon Sangam happen? Watch carefully. First, Kundalis meet. If you are Manglik, no Sambhog, sorry. Then parents meet. Then wedding meet. Then Swagrat. Now we all know what happens at the Swagrat.
What happened, sir? Tell us now, we don't know.
Beta, the boy inserts his Indian culture into the female values. And then we all know what happens.
A baby is born?
No, stupid! कुछ तो होमवर्क करके नहीं आया ना? Please take out a textbook. अभी निकालो books. Chapter 6 पे जाओ.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Welcome to week 5 of current issues in Malaysian education system. So for this week, we are going to discuss on the topic of the need of sexual education in Malaysian education system. And my name is Nurin Adamiti Abdul Razak, and with my other presenter, we are going to discuss further into this topic. But before we begin, let me show you something. So, what you just see on your screen is the statistic of sexual harassment cases reported involving teenagers and children from 2000 until 2017. The reported cases involving cases such as sexual harassment or sexual abuse, rape, teenagers' pregnancy, and sexual transmission infection disease, or known as STID, are increasing each year. And what is more shocking, teenagers are the highest contributor to the increasing of this number. And we still can't find the solution. According to the research conducted in 2015 and 2017, it is said that Malaysians lack the knowledge of sexual education, and with cultural taboo and stigma, we tend to shy away and avoid talking this matter. But sexual education should be taught in school to educate students on this matter. This can help them and protect them from being manipulated and abused by a wicked person such as a pedophile. But are we ready enough to embed sexual education in our national syllabus? And if we are ready, should sex education be taught as a sole subject or to be embedded into another subject? To dig more on this topic, let's listen to the next presenter, Farisa. I cannot.
Well, thank you, Nanat. I am Farisa, and I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of sexual education. Before we go there, let's think about what kind of concerns that our government are going to face if the sexual education is going to be a sole subject or integrated into different subjects that already existed. First of all, they have to come up with new syllabus, written text and modules, because yeah, they have to change a lot of stuff, and they're gonna need a lot of money for that. And of course, the most important thing is the person who's going to impart the knowledge, which is the teachers. And teachers' readiness is very important because, well, they can't teach the topic just like any other subjects. They have to have enough maturity, experiences, and a strong mentality to handle any sensitivity that arises during teaching the topic. So yeah, teachers' readiness is also important. On to the pros of sexual education. First of all, sexual education teaches students about their anatomy. Anatomy is the study of the body, and yes, students have to know their body parts. What are the functions of their each body parts? And sometimes there are students that don't know the functions of the body parts. There are people like that. So that, yeah, sexual education is important. Next is to reduce sexual activity in our country. Well, our country, most of the parents or any adults around us stress on marriage before doing that. So yeah, if they were taught about the dangers of doing sexual activity from a young age, or doing unprotected sexual intercourse, they'll be able to think about, should I do this? Should I not? Okay. And next is to teach them safe sex protection. Okay. We don't want to encourage students to do that, but we do want them to know that there is a safe way if they want to do that. And yeah, we don't want to encourage them, but we do want them to do it safely if they want. But some students also thought of like doing it for fun, but then they were kind of like, if they have to do it safely, there are things that they have to buy. And yes, and some students, they don't have money for that. That could be the reason why they won't do it. So it's a good thing. Next is consent. So consent is important. And well, let's say that these two partners want to do it. Acts have to be consensual, you know. So there won't be any of them going to jail because they don't get consent from the partner. You have to get consent from females and males party. Okay. Yeah. Even okay. So it's also, when we teach consent to underage kids, especially primary school students, they'll know that if they were ever having unwanted circumstances where they were touched inappropriately by someone they don't know or someone they know, that's a good way, because they'll be able to protect themselves. They will know that that kind of touch is inappropriate, so they're not giving consent to the touch, and that could avoid the child from being molested further. So in a way, it's good for younger kids who can't protect themselves, but at least they know what is wrong and what is right when people are touching them. So yeah, consent is very important. And lastly is to reduce teen pregnancy rates. Teen pregnancy rates in Malaysia is quite high, and that's very shocking. We're teaching them, introducing them to this sexual topic, sexual education in Malaysia. We can actually reduce those cases like teen pregnancy, abortion, baby dumping, or whatsoever regarding this issue can be reduced. Like, we can't make them to zero, but we can reduce them. So that's better than having a high rates of teen pregnancy, abortion, or baby dumping. Kind of sexual education is that it will deter students from buying contraception. And actually, it depends on how the program, the modules, or how the teacher teach the students about sexual education. Students will find out that if they were only taught on how to abstain from doing the act, they will be like, oh, if I just do it that way, so she won't get pregnant. That's some kind of thoughts that will run through their heads. And yeah, so that's the bad side of it. Next is the motive for initiating sex behavior will increase. Well, humans are curious creatures, right? So if we tell them not to do it, we will feel like we want to do it. So I guess this is true for some people. You know that if you do it, it's wrong. For Muslim, we know that if you do it before we are legally married, it's wrong. But of course, we can't curb people's desires. We can't curb their curiosity. So when they learn about these things, they will have this kind of thought that, oh, I see. It's there, and they'll think about how to get a partner and do it. So that's not why we want to teach sexual education. We don't want to encourage them. We are not like Western countries. Western countries do teach sexual education so that they have a safe sex. They even make songs out of it. But here we want to curb them. We want to teach them the side effects. If they're going to do it, well, we're going to teach them the side effects. Yes, but still, we don't want to encourage them, but we'll let them have the knowledge so that they know it, so they know what's there. This is not just fun. There's also effects, and yeah. And the last one is tainted modesty. In country, this kind of mindset has always been there, that we shouldn't talk about this kind of stuff in public or openly because it's embarrassing. Like, when girls talk to their friends about periods, they don't talk about that with their male friends. So that's different kind of embarrassment. This one is they think it's really a bad thing if you go out and talk about this stuff in front of people. You're gonna have a bad opinions about you. And these kind of thoughts actually have to stop. We have so many cases. We have so many unwanted pregnancy, unwanted abortion, illegal abortion, and baby dumping, murdering newborns. And so this is very important. Children have to know, students have to know. They need to learn, and they need to have the knowledge. If they're going to do it, if they're going to not do it, it's the same thing. They still have to learn. If they're good kids, bad kids, they still have to learn. And it's kind of sad because our country is so lagging behind about this kind of education. Because if in Germany, they have been doing this since 1970s, yet the birth rate is low. Compared to us, our birth rate is very high, and their birth rate there is very low. So that's it. Okay, so now I'm going to pass this baton, like doll, to the next presenter, which is Farah. Here you go.
Thank you, Cik Sah. Hi, my name is Nur Farah Atika binti Muhammad Saleh. I'll continuing the subtopic under the point of elaboration of the subjects. Okay, I'm showing you on the slide is the website of Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development. So, did you know Malaysia does have a sex education program called the Reproductive and Social Health Education, or also known as PEERS. It has been taught to Year 1 to Form 5 students since 2011. Okay, as you can see in the website, The National Reproductive and Social Health Education Policy that applies to all walks of life regardless of age helps to increase the knowledge on sexual reproductive health among Malaysians and encourage them to have a positive attitudes towards reproductive and social services. Or peers, earlier known as PKRS policy. But in 2012, the Policy and Action Plan for National Reproductive and Social Health Education was known as PKRT policy, if you ever heard of PKRT before. Okay. So the rationale of this program is that the reproductive and social health education is a lifelong process for acquiring comprehensive knowledge and of biological, socio-cultural, psychological and spiritual aspects towards healthy behavioral practice in life. Thus, this educational and knowledge on this sex education helps the formation of responsible individuals, thus create a Malaysian society that is free from the growing social phenomena. Moving on to the next slide. What are the current available programs? Okay. Sexuality education has been integrated into the mainstream educational system by MOE, or Ministry of Education, since 1989 for secondary school students and also to primary school students. The subjects have been taught since 1994. Okay, according to MOE, the subject related to biological, socio-cultural, psychological and spiritual aspects of sexuality have been introduced to students as part of the syllabus in language, science, biology, Islamic education and moral education subjects. Okay. Initially, modules related to sexuality education were called as family health education or pendidikan kesihatan keluarga during 1989 to 2002. And then it changed to sexuality education or pendidikan sexuality during 2003 to 2005. However, the term sexuality carries negative connotation to conservative society in Malaysia. Hence, the term reproductive health and social education or peers have been used since 20 December 2006. Okay, initially, peers was part of physical fitness and health education or pendidikan jasmani dan kesihatan. But then, since 2011, pendidikan kesihatan has been taught as an individual subject. Peers comprised about 75% of health education subject, which focuses on social skills and sexuality education. And it aims to inculcate positive perspective on reproductive and social health, and also to provide necessary information about sexual health, and also help students to have skills to make a responsible decision related to their sexuality and social life. Okay, the Ministry of Education has yet to determine what should be taught and who is qualified to teach sex education to students. And in addition, at what age does students should be given sex education and how to convey information on sex is still a question. Although there is no special subject entitled sex education in schools, MOE has introduced subjects related to sexuality and reproductive health. Topics related to sex education presented in variety of subjects such as health and physical education or PJPK, Islamic studies, moral education, science, additional science and biology. The curriculum is available in such subjects that is discussed matters related to physical health, sexuality, reproduction, and moral aspects of the relationships between the sexes. Okay, these are the example of 3 subjects taught at school. Okay, distribution of teaching subjects related to the topic of sex education causes students not to look at the comprehensive sex-related matters. As example, for the biology teachers, they explain the aspects of physical of the sex education. Okay, for this one, I'll show you the example later on the next slide. Okay. While for the religious teacher and the moral education teacher, they taught the religious values, the social consequences, and also they actually repeating the same information in their teaching, which are related to the sexual education. Okay, as example, religious and moral education at public schools in Malaysia, they taught these 2 subjects separately. Just like your school days before, the moral students and the Muslim students are separated in in 2 different classes during the 2 subjects session. And as part of curricula, Islamic education at primary and lower secondary schools teaches Muslim students on Islamic ways of social relationship between boys and girls, emphasizing on chastity and aurah. While for the higher secondary Muslim students are also taught about religious teaching on munakahat or marriage, and they are reminded to avoid religiously forbidden sexual behaviors such as zina, fornication, and homosexuality, liwat, sodomy, and musakaha, lesbian. Okay, while for the moral education, it teaches non-Muslim students on several main principles of producing holistic individuals, physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, and socially. Part of the syllabus is teaching students on values related to humans' right, such as respecting women's rights. And there is neither specific topic on human rights nor did women's rights are taught in that or directly to Muslim students. Okay, this is the further explanation on the science or biology topics now. Okay, topics on sexuality were touched upon in physical education, PJPK, tasawwur Islam, and also moral education. But the amount of the content in the subjects is smaller compared to the science, biology, and Islamic education subjects. Okay, most students encountered their first experience with sexual education through related topics as early as Form 3, Form 4, and Form 5. Okay, as you can see on the slides, the scope of the teachers' discussions focus on the development of the reproductive system, sexual intercourse, fertilization, and the process of giving birth. These are the examples of what you have learned during your biology class when you were in Form 4 and Form 5. This is a newspaper excerpt with the headline of "Schools Urge Not to Take Sex Education Lightly." Okay, in the picture is the Deputy Education Minister, Teo Ni Ching, which she said sex education was currently being taught at the preschool until secondary school levels as one of the elements under PJPK or Physical Education and Health Education. Malaysia has become a hotspot for sexual crimes against children, so we must teach our children from a young age how to prevent it. She hopes that schools don't treat PJPK as an unimportant subject and replace it with mathematics or English classes. Preschool children were being taught to say no and to differentiate between safe and unsafe touch. The schools are teaching the students on how to differentiate sentuhan selamat, safe touch, from sentuhan tidak selamat, unsafe touch, and sentuhan selesa, comfortable touch, from sentuhan tidak selesa, uncomfortable touch, to prevent sexual harassment. Okay, our children nowadays get information from social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and even through Instagram. So it is important that schools are teaching students the proper and right way, which up-to-date information. And also, she added that the sex education syllabus would be reviewed from time to time. And in a matter of fact, in November 2019, it was announced that Year 6 and Form 5 students will learn about statutory rape, child grooming, and sexual harassment as part of their school syllabus starting next year, 2021. According to New Straits Times, this will be taught from the perspective of law, adding that this was to enable students to learn about relevant legal issues on the subject, including sexual consent. Sex education should be a holistic subject that includes teachings about the psychological, emotional, and psychological aspects of sex. These are what Deputy of Education Minister Teo Ni Ching said during the visit to one of the schools in Penang. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you. Next presenter, Farah Hanani.
Thank you, Farah. Okay, my name is Farah Hanani and I will continue with the presentation, and my topic is the stigma and taboo in sexual education for teachers and students' perspective. So let's go. Okay, now these are the stigma according to teachers' perspective. First is acceptance and interpretation. Second is feel ashamed to talk about sexual education, to explain about it. Third is the syllabus lacks clarity and it is so vague. And last is it's a teacher's responsibility to teach it. Okay, we'll start with the first point, which is acceptance and interpretations. First thing first, we need to know that sexual education is not about sexual intercourse only. It is more than that. However, in Malaysia, most people still find that the term sexual education itself is a taboo and we cannot talk about it freely, which says a lot of why it is difficult to embed sexual education as a sole subject if the general understanding on sex is still low. But if we consider to teach sexual education in schools, it will be a good method to prevent from the increase of unwanted pregnancies or baby dumping issues, because the students are aware of the knowledge that they learn from sexual educations. It is also to educate the students about the deadly diseases that they will get if they are having unprotected sex. The deadly diseases are like STDs, which stands for sexually transmitted disease, and STIs stands for sexually transmitted infections. And of course, in the syllabus, there's information about condom and contraceptions, which the students need to know that these are the things that will help them to avoid from unwanted pregnancies. Okay, just like what Jasmine Jalil said here, when we teach youth about sex and correct condom usage, it doesn't really mean that we are encouraging them to have sex. Just that we want them to know that sexually transmitted disease like HIV, AIDS does exist. If they do not know this
safety aspect informations. inside our textbooks, they won't use words like sex, they would use words like copulation.
We decided to look through some school textbooks to find out what is in the curriculum.
The books for primary schools are really good. They have topics on good touch, bad touch, on the different kind of body parts.
The secondary school books, there's a lot of moral values attached, even if the subject is health or science. And more than that, there's absolutely no talk about sexual relationships, about consent, about anything practical for real life.
We don't provide a full range of information required by the young people to make a decision for themselves. If they are sexually active, therefore much more work needs to be done.
When we approached Malaysia's largest teachers' union for comment, we found that the problem wasn't just the textbooks.
Earlier when this topic was debated, the teachers were very, very unhappy because they have their own beliefs, strong beliefs, and religious teachers and all this. They feel that why they're forced to do that. Because we are still a society with shyness. Sex is something that people still feel very sensitive. People still feel this is something very personal, very private.
Okay, now we move to our second point, which is feeling ashamed to explain about sexual education to students. Yes, there are teachers who think that this is a sensitive topic that needs to be discussed with their students because we are talking about the nature of human body. So if they shy away from this topic, students might not know what is happening with their body system. For instance, there are some female students who might not know why are they suddenly bleeding when they reach the puberty phase. So imagine if she only have brothers as siblings and a mother who don't really talk about this sexual things really with her. Of course, we as the teachers that need to be the one who provide her with this sexual information so that they know what is the menstruation process is all about. But again, in Malaysia, we do not have many teachers who's expert in teaching sexual educations. So it is a must for the teachers to attend courses that related with sexual education in order for them to teach the subjects to their students, because like it or not, sexual educations are a very essential subject that we need to learn in our life, especially when there are many sexual crimes that happen nowadays. Okay, our next point is the syllabus lacks clarity and it is so vague. Just like what Farah said, Malaysia do have a sexual education program called PEERS, which involve Year 1 until Form 5 students. The PEERS syllabus teaches primary school students important informations like good touch and bad touch. It is also introduced to preschool at kindergarten. So by learning this, students will know how to differentiate safe touch, unsafe touch, comfortable touch, and uncomfortable touch in order to prevent from sexual harassment. If students can construe with such knowledge, it will help them to identify unsafe situations when they encounter someone that try to do bad things to them. Because there's a statistic that shows 94% of sexual crime cases against children were committed by adults who they know. So if they know, if they have knowledge on sexual educations, it is easy for them to seek help from their teachers and their parents. But according to UKM study, the student explained that the information given by most of the teachers were vague, thus defeating the purpose of the students to learn on the issue. For example, when the teachers only explain about sexual intercourse and fertilizations without making any relations with the value aspects. If it's too vague for the students to understand, they might not know that baby can be made during the process. If they start to curious and brave enough to ask questions like how babies are made, teachers, for some teachers they might be flabbergasted to answer it, but most of them just shy away about this topic and move on with the discussions about the topic. And this is very dangerous because students might have different interpretations that might be misleading. So teachers need to give the exact fact for them to learn, not to explore by themselves. And yeah, our textbook about sexual educations is also one of the problem when the informations provided are not adequate enough for the students to learn about sexual education. So yes, I understand that most teachers would rather avoid this issue because they are worried about the students' acceptance and interpretations when they learn about sex. But teachers must never use analogy and metaphor during explanation. It is not okay to do that because even though the main problem was the syllabus, was our textbooks for being too vague, but what teachers can do is to search about it and just straight away explain using facts that they found. The syllabus also lacks clarity because most people have the perceptions that sexual education is against their religious restrictions and cultural taboo. Well, I know that we are still a society with shyness, but if teachers are too technical and academic, it is not very helpful for students to understand what happened when they have sex. And like I said before, misleading information might be transferred to students, and that's why these sexual crimes will keep happening among teenagers. Last but not least, people always have these perceptions that everything is a teacher responsibility in order to teach and to produce a good generations. Well, that's a big no, because it's supposed to be everyone's responsibilities in ensuring that students grow into a knowledgeable individual, especially parents. They are the one who live under the same roof with the students, so they must monitor students' activities when they are at home. They also need to realize how crucial to teach sexual education to their children, and they must discuss it freely with them so that the students are also comfortable to ask questions about it. So parents, please remember to always communicate, be sensitive and observant towards your children, and it should not be a taboo to discuss sex with your own children because it gives benefit for them to know about it. Because if parents tend to avoid about sexual topic with their children and think that they will learn about it in schools, it's the same as the parents are not responsible towards their children's safety, which could lead to all these sexual crimes that happen in Malaysia. And yes, parents should be the one that give early exposure to their children so that they know about abstinence in order to refrain themselves from having sex, including to protect them from sexual harassment and abuse.
First line पढ़ो.
These are a gift from God.
Exactly. जब आप शादी करते हो तो भगवान आपको एक बच्चा गिफ्ट देता है. हाँ, पर अगर लड़की हुई तो कब पंचायत के थ्रू रिटर्न पॉलिसी भी है.
But sir, how come there are 1.3 billion people in this country?
Very good question, Subramaniam. I'll tell you. 1.3 billion gods into one blessing is equal to 1.3 billion babies. Any more important questions? Anyone?
Sir.
Yes? Anyone? 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 You? Anyone? Nobody? Okay, no problem. Moving on.
Okay, now let's proceed with students' perspective. First is not allowed to know about sex. Sexual education is for immoral students only. Self-learn from various media, have the urge to try it, and lastly, hard for them to speak up. Okay, this is the most common stigma on why most people are against sexual education in Malaysia, because they think that the children are not allowed to know about sex. They also think that the children are too young to know about it. And another one is people think that sexual education promotes sexual activities and it can lead to the increased numbers of sexual cases among teenagers. However, the real intentions to teach sexual education is to help youngsters to delay sexual initiation and also act as a preventive measure against STDs, STI, and unwanted pregnancies. Because believe it or not, this problem is so severe that an estimated 18,000 underage girls get pregnant in Malaysia each year. Okay, next is sexual education is for immoral students only. This is as bad as the stigma where people think it's a teacher's responsibility to teach about sexual education. But again, this is a big no, because sexual education should be taught equally to every student. No matter good or bad students, anyone can be involved in sexual activities, sexual harassment and abuse. So in order to avoid this thing from happening, students need to have an adequate information about sexual education so that they are aware about everything that's going on around them. And of course, such labels and self-identifications are very dangerous because no one will like to be labeled like that. So don't give unnecessary stress to students and make them feel bad about themselves. Okay, most parents thought that their children will learn about sexual education in schools. However, we still have problems in providing proper content in our school textbook and teachers' vague explanations about when they teach sexual education. Even though if the students can learn about sexual education from various media, they might only find information that covers basic mechanics of sex and the details are not thoroughly explained. But we must know that students need to learn a comprehensive curriculum covering bodily changes during puberty, sexuality, a healthy relationship, and biology, so that it allows them to make informed decisions about their sexual health. So it would have been right if schools can be the one that teach them the proper and the right things with up-to-date information. And it is also a human right to receive a proper education. So don't deny their right and don't ever think that they will know about sexual education on their own, because it's very dangerous if they found a not so good information online. Okay, next is have the urge to try it. This is definitely the biggest concern that make most Malaysians are against sexual education. Adults are shying away from talking about sexual education because they don't want the children to have the thought of trying sex after they are exposed to all the information that related to it. But some surveys show results that students don't even know the consequences of unprotected sex. In fact, there is also a case whereby a girl believed her mother that she could get pregnant if she was kissed by a man. So from this evidence, we must realize that sexual education is really important. Students must know about the risk of unwanted pregnancies and why it is never a good idea to enter into early parenthood, especially when they are not financially, physically, and mentally prepared. Okay, lastly, it's hard for them to speak up. Is this because the students think that most adults consider sexual education as a taboo topic that cannot be discussed publicly? But the stigma would make the students suffer because if they are a victim of a sexual harassment or abuse, they don't know how to speak up. The worst thing that could happen if they speak the truth is when people victim blaming them, especially when the victim is a girl. Because we often see that when a rape case happens, people usually put the blame on how the girl is dressed that make the rapist rape her. Like, seriously, it was never a matter of how she's dressed, because nowadays even a baby was raped, so how come someone's clothes was the first issue that you want to discuss? Just imagine for a second if the victim is your family member. Would you still support the rapist's actions? Or if the rapist is your loved one, would you let your daughter suffer alone, just like in the example given? Because it's really sad the fact that most victims actually know who raped them, but they were caught in situations where it is hard for them to speak up. That is why sexual education is really important, so that the students know the ways that could help them protect themselves from this kind of dangerous situations that could happen to them. So that is all from me. Thank you. And now I will pass this presentation to the next presenter, Nurul.
Thank you, Farah. So my name is Nurul Shafika. I will continue the presentation with the stigma and taboo of parents and society.
So we will start with the parents. Right, so basically most of the parents think that the acquisition of intimate knowledge about sex by youth at the early age can cause them to be uninterested and ignorant about this topic. Alright, so for this reason, some of the conservative parents believe that there is no need for their children to learn about sex, to understand about sex until a definitive adult relationship is at hand. So based on this statement, we understand that most of the parents think that their kids will eventually learn as they grow up. So there is no need for a formal teaching. So at the young age, we have no ideas. They say that at the young age, they have no idea what they are learning, especially about human body and so on. So parents also worry that these children will not focus on the lesson delivered, but rather to try it out and experiment on their own. So basically this is a wrong stigma, because actually parents shouldn't be afraid to tell their children about sexual education in a relevant way. So moving on to the second point, which is corrupt the students' moral standing and incline them to engage in sex. So many parents think that the sex education programs give the students information which may result in sexual ideas and experimentation among the students. At the same time, parents also worried that if they teach their children about sex at a young age, it can encourage them to have sex. So this is not true and has been dispelled by many of the researchers, And according to a report by UNICEF, it stated that the children that were armed and equipped with the knowledge about sexual education have fewer partners and become sexually active much later in life rather than those without it. Alright, so there was a study in 2010 about parents' attitudes towards the inclusion of sexuality education in Malaysian school. So these are some of the parents' responses towards sex education. So mother one, sex education will create curiosity about sex among school children. It is difficult to teach them because they will not understand it. It is enough to teach them some basic aspects of male and female relationship. Right, so mother two said, I don't want these people think of intimate relationship. They will not pay attention to the lessons, but rather to try it. It is too early for them. Let them know by themselves. It is not good. So based on the responses, we could see that these parents just see the sex education based on their own perspective. So this is important to explain to the parents the rationale of the subjects, and the school itself can actually work together with the parents so that the parents will know about the syllabus and what their children will be learning. Alright, so moving on to point number 3, which is the material talk is mostly against the moral or religious belief that the students have been brought up with. Right, sex education usually is provided within a secular context, and any moral or religious background of teaching is ignored. But it kind of not true, because in our culture, usually when the teachers teach about sexual education, they usually relate it with our religions, what you can do, what you cannot do before marriage, and so on. So basically, even the religion itself play significant roles in individual life. We know that, and then even many research indicate that the religious commitment and participation in religious activities also can result in sexual abstinence, right? So basically, religion can therefore be seen can bring a positive impact on sexual attitudes and among youth and so on. So basically, the reasoning behind this, it is not the rules of sex education itself is not to instruct the students to not to have sex for the rest of their life, but there are times but to provide comprehensive and inclusive education about sex, what they can do before marriage, what they cannot do before marriage. Alright, in a 2010 study, majority of the rural parents surveyed agreed that the teaching of abstinence, contraception, open communication with family, as well as the Islamic view on sexuality should be taught in schools. However, when asked about more taboo topics such as teen pregnancy or premarital sex, they proved to be more apprehensive. They also agreed that it should be taught at a primary level, but couldn't agree on a specific grade to introduce the program. So maybe what we can do about this, maybe we could design a programs that fulfill the Islamic ideals of sexual education within the concept of spirituality and morality, but not at the expense of comprehensive curriculum for primary school students. So last but not least, the point for parents is limited sexual knowledge of parents, different sexual values, lack of communication skills, and parents not receiving sex education from their parents. So many parents think that they themselves have limited knowledge about sex education. They didn't learn sex education from their parents, so how do they teach their children about this? So if we think that the early exposure of sex education should be from home, from parents, not from the teachers. So however, many parents feel discomfort discussing about the sexual matter and so on, so they pass the responsibility to the teachers. So in such a culture, the youth is forbidden to talk about sex, and the only sources of sexual information is from peers, from television, from the internet, from the social media. So can you imagine how disastrous it could be if they just take and absorb the information from outside without any filter? So it is very dangerous, yeah. So and then the fact that many students don't have parents or have working parents whom they don't see every day. So this can lead to awkward conversation whenever they want to discuss about sex education and so on. And usually people tend to brush off the topic just like that. Alright, so but even though the early exposure should be from the parents, but I still think that we still need a comprehensive public schools education because it is more standardized and more informative because yeah, parents, they have a limited knowledge about sex education. Alright, so moving on to the society. Alright, so first aspect is sexual education can destroy the innocence of youth. Alright, so basically the society worried that the provision or the exposure of too much or the wrong kind of sexual education might affect the younger generation. So basically, as we all know, in sex education itself, it includes the teachings of abstinence, safe sex practices, homosexuality, and sexual diversity if it is in overseas. Alright, so basically, since sex education is provided within a value neutral environment, so the youth-led guidance on this matter are left to do whatever they want with the information provided. So that's what concerns the society. Alright, so the second point is sexuality education was seen as incompatible with the local culture and religious values as it confronts local ideas about sexual morality. So basically, in the context of Muslim majority country like Malaysia, we know that sexual education is a taboo subject to be taught in schools. So that is why it is being embedded in any other subject such as biology, physical education, moral and Islamic studies. So this arises because many feels uncomfortable to teach because it is against the people culture to talk and discuss about the sensitive organs of human body openly. So, however, even though this subject has been embedded in any other subjects, but there are several studies, several surveys indicate that students still do not know how to protect themselves from sexual predators, reckless behavior, and sexually transmitted diseases (STD), as they only obtained inadequate information about sexuality in the public schools, which generally only teach the basic facts about reproduction in science courses. Okay, last but not least is genuine worry that the program would encourage youth to engage in sexual activity. So they should be informed that sexual education doesn't only include topics regarding sex alone. However, it makes up a huge portion of the subjects. So this is the kind of the misinformation that prevent the students to learn in a right way. So in sex education, it includes the topics such as dealing with relationship, puberty, sexual diversity, stigma surrounding sexuality, sexuality-based discrimination, and gender equality. So all these topics that are covered in sexual education are meant to embolden and empower the children to understand the changes in their body, not to encourage them to have sex. Okay, that's all from our group. Thank you.
But before
we end our video,
we have interviewed a few people regarding this issue.
So let's watch.
Yes,
It is important because it can help students aware of sexual harassment from stranger and sexual practice.
Yes, I do think that sexual education is very important to be taught at school because sexual education or sex ed is actually a part of education where it exposes students to human development, okay, puberty, growth, okay, your glands, what actually happening to your body when you grow up.
Jawapannya penting untuk mengelakkan pelajar terdedah kepada kegiatan yang tidak bermudarat dan mereka boleh dapat dengan melayari laman sosial lucah dan berkongsi gambar-gambar terlampau.
I think it is very important for students nowadays to learn about sex education. Because I think information now comes very easy. We can watch something on YouTube or browsing something on the internet and it just come out of nowhere, a pop-up screen showing pictures, videos that have sexual content. So if we don't educate them ourselves properly, give good information, they might become curious and try to find out by themselves, and they might end up seeking at a wrong place and learning about wrong things and experimenting themselves. So I think it is very dangerous if we let them search about sex education themselves. So we have to educate them as early, very early, so they understand it properly and does not looking for it somewhere inappropriate.
And your interrelationship with humans, right? Your parents, your family members, and your friends, your dating life. Personal skill, personal skill in here is not just your soft skill. It's not the general soft skill where you speak to the general public or you're having a very great charisma. It's not that. It's actually more to decision making. How do you manage your life? How do you control or manage your perception towards sex in general? And sexual behavior, consent and such, okay, we all know that. And sexual health, STDs, pregnancy, what happens during or past pregnancy, birth controls, that part, and society and culture in general. That means where sex ed actually teaches the important roles, the important gender roles in the society, let's say in our context in Malaysia. So that's basically it. So that's why sex ed is very important. In my opinion, it has to be around 2 to 3 years old.
For me, starting from standard 3.
Umur 12 tahun sebelum memasuki sekolah menengah.
I think it should be as early as 7 years old, and it should start at home with the parents.
Because at this age, some children, they have already practiced independency from their parents. Okay, they learn how to wear clothes by themselves. They learn how to wash themselves. They learn how to shower by themselves. So this kind of independence is the right signs that where parents should teach sex ed informally. So what are the contents? Might be consent. Number 2 is your private parts. Know your private parts. So for boys, what are your private parts? Your chest, your crotch, okay, your backside. Same as a girl, okay. Where is your private part? Okay, your lips or your neck. So these kind of private parts, we need to tell our children. Okay, you cannot have other people touch it without your consent. So if you're sending your children to kindergarten or any play school and they have complaints that my teacher touch this. Oh, my teacher do this. Okay, so you know what is actually happening at the play school. I'm not saying that pedophilia cases are in play school or kindergarten, but it's not like that. It's not trying to accuse them. It's just that it is important for them to know, okay? Because in my experience as a kindergarten teacher, we do ask parents about, in my kindergarten specifically, we ask them, we ask the parents about, do you teach your child about your private parts, okay? I'm a male teacher and apparently your son is a male, okay? I will, most of the washing and all that, I will be responsible for him. So am I allowed to help him wash himself? Am I allowed to help him shower? Okay, I will tell the parents that if the child is a girl, okay, I would rather pass it to female teachers.
It is very important to teach them sexual education before they reach puberty. For example, at 7 years old, parents can teach the children to ask permission before entering adults' rooms and should separate beds between siblings and relatives of the opposite genders. And for Muslim, they should teach about rules of mahram and non-mahram between genders as early as 7 to 10 years old of age.
So that's basically it. Okay, when you teach them at a very young age, they know actually which part, how to take care of themselves. Okay, the part of taking care of themselves is already settled, and as they move forward towards their age, they might then to ask you, the parents, like where do babies come from? Okay, when they hit their puberty, okay, they will start ask you about what's going to happen to my body. Okay, boys gonna ask, I just peed myself in the room. Actually, I don't pee myself in bed. So that at that time you know what is actually happening. So by sex ed, in school during the puberty age around 9, 10, 11 years old, it's a very good time to actually teach them about the body changes, in human body changes during puberty. And when they go up around Form 4, Form 5, they can learn about the importance of having a good sexual conduct, practicing abstinence, okay, chastise themselves from and refrain themselves from having a premarital sex, let's say like that. Yeah, so start at a very young age. You cannot start at a very old age because it's already too late for that. They might explore things before you could explain things to them.
I think it can be integrated into those subjects. For example, in Pendidikan Islam, they can teach about, like I said before, mahram and non-mahram, about lowering gaze when you look at opposite genders, the etiquette when you talk to opposite genders. In Pendidikan Moral and also Pendidikan Islam, we can teach them about safe touch and unsafe touch. For example, like shown in this diagram.
Diajar dalam subjek sains lah, sebab dalam mata pelajaran sains tu telah pun ada sistem reproduktif dan kita rancit. Dia cuma perlu ditambah baik.
In my opinion, I prefer if it taught through existing subject that related because it's a lot more easier, and if it taught as new subject, it will burdening student in the addition number of subject at school.
If taught in school, I would say we need to integrate the subjects into other subjects, like having a sex ed subject standalone. A standalone sex ed subject is very, very hard to actually to be implemented in schools because of the background knowledge, because some children, they've already had the background knowledge of sex education. We're going to learn about sex. No, it's not just that. It's actually more to human development, like I said before, okay, human relationship, your decision making, society and cultural view of sex itself, all this very wide topic. But if we have a very trained personnel to teach the children about sex ed, I think that would be good. But for normal teachers, I think it's better for them to actually teach sex education by integrating with the subjects that they teach, especially pendidikan Islam or moral, or you can say that in other subjects like biology, science, okay, about human development. So when you integrate the subject into the subject, it will be easier for you to actually push it a bit, without they noticing. Like for instance, in biology, okay, you can teach we do have the subtopic in schools, right? So that's a part of sexual education. So does in pendidikan Islam, we actually have munakahat about the religions Islam's view about marriage. Okay, munakahat. So in munakahat, we teach them about the responsibility of a husband, responsibility of a wife. Okay, why? What is just beyond sex? Okay, people, because children, when they think about marriage, oh, we got the green light to actually practice sex. Okay, it's not just that. Okay, it's about commitment, your responsibility. You can actually put that into your subject. Or in physical or health education, PJK, you can teach them about the STDs, the risk of having a bad sexual conduct, or the importance for you to actually practice abstinence. All these kind of things can be integrated in what's already available in school, and the teachers really need to actually practice or getting trained into how to integrate this.
Teach them about adab, about how to work between opposite genders. I don't think we need a new subject for it, but it can be integrated in existing subjects.
Okay, and if they are being if teachers are being asked about questions relating to that, they need to be trained how to actually not avoid the question. It's just like answering the question without actually answer the question that satisfies the students' curiosity. Even they're joking around, we can turn it into a information session. I think sex ed needs to be taught to all students without having any exclusive rights or anything, because the basic foundation of education is actually inclusive. So we need to include all students.
I think it should be taught to all students, regardless whether they are problematic or non-problematic.
Pada pendapat saya, semua pelajar lah, sama ada lelaki ataupun perempuan.
For me, all, because everyone needs to be exposed to knowledge and awareness of sexual crimes.
The problematic students usually come from a broken family. Usually, parents got divorced. Sometimes parents are drug addicts. Parents are alcoholic. There are domestic violence in the house. Parents does not spend enough time with their children because usually they work 2-3 jobs to take care of the family. So they end up seeking attention and love from bad influence people who usually use their money for sexual purpose, but they don't aware of it. Okay, so end up they become victims of sexual predators. For the non-problematic children, usually what happens is because sexual how to say, learning about sexual is actually a nature, so they sometimes become curious about sex, and they try to learn it by themselves, but end up being groomed by sexual predators, or they end up searching for it at inappropriate source and experimenting among themselves. or with their boyfriend or girlfriend like that. So that what usually happens for the non-problematic students. So I think we need to be teach to all.
It doesn't surprise me, in my opinion, it doesn't surprise me if students around 16 or 17 years of age, they've already experienced, some students that have already experienced sexual intercourse. It doesn't surprise me because they've already exposed, you know, in today's technology, you can view anything from the internet, even such very young age. So that's why it is very important to actually include. Okay, like I can say that almost a majority number of students know what is pornography, what is sexual intercourse, but only a few numbers of them who actually have experience in it. So in order to avoid the problem, okay, we need to include everyone in the sex ed classes.
Ya, pendidikan seksual akan dapat mengurangkan pergaulan bebas di kalangan pelajar kerana mereka dapat menghadkan interaksi antara lelaki dan perempuan dan pentingnya untuk memelihara kehormatan diri dan mengetahui penyakit-penyakit yang boleh berjangkit akibat hubungan seksual yang tidak selamat seperti penyakit AIDS, STD dan herpes.
I sure hope so. Yes, I think it can help.
Yes, because students will be more aware on sexual cases and prevent them from social interaction among girls and boys.
Dia juga bagaimana untuk mengelakkan kehamilan yang tidak diingini dan juga dapat mengurangkan kes keganasan seksual.
In my opinion, honestly speaking, it would not be that effective. But if implemented well, students can know actually how to decide, okay? Because like I said beforehand, sex ed helps students to, you know, having their own decision making, practice having a good decision making in life. So because, you know, like I said before, they have this background knowledge of sex being a fun thing to do, you know, a very exciting thing, when actually it's just commitment and responsibility. Okay, and in sex education they also teach you how to actually avoid, you know, getting teenage pregnancy by encouraging like I said before, encouraging abstinence, encouraging chastity, and what to do if you're in an accident. Let's say, you're accidentally pregnant because of your previous sexual encounter. So in sex ed, they actually teach you how to solve that. It's not running away from the problem, is how to solve it. That includes birth control, abortion, or if you want to continue with the teenage pregnancy, you can, if you think you cannot handle the baby, you can drop it on the baby hatch. But it's actually the most important part is in sex ed is practicing abstinence. Okay, teachers especially, they need to encourage students to practice abstinence, because at the end of the day, it goes by the saying of saving yourself for marriage. You know, the old saying of saving yourself to marriage, right? So as you grow older, okay, beyond your secondary school years, that is the time where you actually mature. You know, you understand what's going on, you know what you're doing, then you can go ahead. But for these school children, they don't know, so you need to tell them that, okay, if you really want to do this, you know, what are the effects that are going to happen. You know, if you actually accidentally pregnant, okay, you're actually pregnant, what are you going to do? Okay, you, the boy, you actually pregnanted your female friend, so what are you going to do? Okay, you're just kids. Okay, you cannot just simply having the baby and such. You still need help from adults. So that's the thing where sex ed plays a bigger role when they actually help students to make the best decision for their life and beyond after school days. So yeah, in conclusion, sex education is very important, and it can be taught formally or informally by schools, parents, or even adults from agencies like the Ministry of Women, Family and Society. Yeah, that's basically it. Thank you.
Okay, lastly, I would like to share a story which I have encountered when I am a houseman. It is about a 16 years old girl who was brought to the hospital by her parents because they thought that their daughter had been raped by her boyfriend, who is a 20 plus years old guy. When we asked further, she actually consent the act. It is a consented sex. When we asked her about the details, she thought it is only a game played by her and the boyfriend. She don't understand that it's actually a sexual act. She don't understand the consequences of it. She don't understand that she can get pregnant from it. She don't understand that she can have sexual transmitted disease. When we ask about HIV, she don't even have a clue. So that is why it is very important to teach them about sexual education to all of the students at a very young age.
Pengalaman saya pernah menemu bual seorang pelajar perempuan berusia 16 tahun yang hamil dengan rakan sebaya. Apabila ditanya, dia sebenarnya tidak mengetahui yang dia boleh hamil dengan melakukan hubungan seksual tersebut. Dan dia sebenarnya tidak ingin akan kehamilan itu dan tidak bersedia untuk melahirkan anak. Dia cuma melakukan hubungan seksual itu hanya untuk berseronok-seronok sahaja dan diajak rakan sebaya.
We also have a few cases where teenagers come into the labor room in labor, about to have a baby, but still deny having sex before. Okay, my last point is it takes a village to raise a child. So we have to work together, the parents, the teachers, the students, the doctors, the healthcare workers, the governments, the community. Okay, we have to work together to teach them about good sexual education so we can reduce the number of sexual cases among our teenagers and early adolescents. Okay, thank you.
How is it even relevant?
So you haven't even taught us anything.
Hey, this is government approved syllabus.
But sir, we already know more than this.
So we are almost 18. Do you think we are stupid?
ठीक है, पूछो क्या पूछना है?
What is homosexuality?
Homosexuality नहीं, homo sangam. अरे boys are not part of Indian culture. Boy marries boy, no dowry. Next.
So, but what about lesbians?
Lesbians are nice, beta. I like girl on girl. You see, girl marries girl, double dowry. Nice, no? Next.
Sir, this is nonsense. How can you call this a sex education class? I mean, which era are you living in? You're teaching us here about sex and you refuse to say the word. Say it, na? Sex. 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 Sex.